Hello and welcome to Tech About Town, brought to you by Communitech. I'm Alex Kinsella. I'm kind of running solo as a host, but I do have two guests in the studio. And today we're going to crack the code on modern media. If you've ever wondered how a YouTube channel hits millions of subscribers, I've actually wondered that, like Mr. Beast or any of the stuff my kids watch, but I'm going to get to that in a second. Or how a business can actually turn a like into a lead. This is the episode for you. On my right, we have Josh, who is the former content director at Hacksmith Entertainment and is now reinventing the game with breakfast cereal. On my left, Clare, a master of authentic video strategy who guides organizations on how to stop selling and start building real trust through the screen. The red light is on. Let's dive into it. Welcome to the studio.
Great to be here.
It's great to be here. Yeah, well, it's great to have you in here. This is the most production talent we've ever had in the room. I'm not talent, so
No,
talented. I'm not talented.
You are.
This is exciting to have you both in here. Norm, you didn't even help. Norm, you built the studio here.
Helped build it.
What is it like to come into the studio that you helped pick
It's
out
amazing.
everything for?
It's absolutely amazing. It's a great space. It's a great space for people to help, create content that informs people, helps people, entertains people.
Drives people to make decisions?
Eventually, hopefully.
Well, the thing that we were talking about, Josh and I were talking about in the lobby before we came upstairs, is really around, the first thing was the term podcast itself. So for everyone who knows, podcast comes from iPod, which sounds kind of weird now that we think about it, because we really do now associate podcast with YouTube content. What are you kind of seeing out there now in terms of like how people are approaching, how people are describing what they're trying to do on YouTube, and whether it really is a podcast versus the kind of content like you're creating?
Yeah. I'd say it's changed a lot over even just the past few years. There's a new podcast form YouTube show popping up, every 10 minutes. So it seems, so it's very oversaturated. But yeah, everybody's got the mic in front of them now, sitting down in the chairs, having a guest on weekly and just chatting whatever the topic of the day is for their niche, whatever that may be, right? So I feel like that wasn't nearly as prevalent just even a couple of years ago, to be honest. You had more of the creator-based platform even maybe 5, even 10 years ago where the guys like you mentioned earlier, the Mr. Beasts, the Hacksmiths here in Ontario, right, and stuff like that. And now I think it's kind of it's moving into more podcasts on YouTube. Yeah,
yeah, and to me it seems like the production, they're simpler productions to do, right? Like it is 2 people or 3 people in front of mics and just talking versus storytelling and content creation.
Yeah, for sure. And you'll see often like just labeled right on the mic. It's clearly just like there's a studio set up and people are just going into this particular studio, sitting down and doing their show. And then the next person's coming in after them and using the same space and the same thing. Right. So I think it's very big business for sure.
And I think one of the things is I've noticed is that people want to carry over that feeling of the audio podcast into their video podcast. And I think that's an important part of it, is they're not trying to convince people this is something else just because there's video added. They want people to still feel like it's a podcast. So visually, how they're expressing that is consistent with how they recorded their audio podcasts.
Yeah, kind of like lo-fi, right? Not audio quality lo-fi, but lo-fi production.
Yeah.
Authentic to the podcast experience production. I've seen some really well done video podcasts, like from a quality standpoint. Shopify, for example, has got a podcast on right now where the lighting is cinematic. It's beautiful, but the content is very rich. Like the stories they're telling and the things they're talking about are very relevant to the audience. So I think you can still do that with really great production value. I think it's important for people to understand the difference between a video produced production and an audio produced podcast. They're still quite different.
Well, I was going to ask you, so you went to film school.
Yeah.
Right. You're a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And then you transitioned into video.
Mm-hmm.
You did a lot of work at Hacksmith, which, really nicely produced stuff. What are kind of the differences there? Like, how is that transition from filmmaking to YouTube? Like, I always kind of think of it as when you're making a film, you're thinking of larger projection,
Yeah.
different experience versus potentially like watching it on 6-inch phone.
So I think the depends on the type of content you're making for YouTube, right? But the film school background and all of that is still relevant because the idea of storytelling and is still relevant with creator-based content, right? So having like the knowledge on even just how to put together an outline for a story for a creator type content video and stuff like that, like the pre-production becomes a big thing. And yeah, I think there's things you got to throw out the window, which I learned pretty quickly moving into a place like Hacksmith, because after film school, I ended up at a production company first, where it was still very much like we would get together on a commercial type shoot and we would spend a day pre-lighting. And, the next day we would do the production and stuff like that. And when you get into YouTube, I moved from there to YouTube and it was like, okay, we have about 7 minutes to set up the lights and no one cares about that. And that's not because anyone's lazy or whatever, but it doesn't really have much of an effect on the performance of the final video, right? So it's where do you want to fight your battle? So I had to learn how to move way, way, way faster and things like that for sure for YouTube.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, and then with what you're working on, you work on a variety of things, but what Josh and you were talking about in terms of like setting up the day before with lighting, then kind of tailoring back to what you were talking about with the cinematic kind of scene of what Shopify does. When you're doing, say, like live stream production, right? What is kind of how do you kind of thread that needle on production quality, authenticity, and then how it actually performs?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I completely agree with what Josh is saying. I think a lot of this for YouTube content boils down to that factor exactly. And also just the volume of content that you have to create. You can't necessarily afford from a resource or budget standpoint to put that much effort into, pre-lighting, pre-production, production, post-production, because you're just never going to create the volume of content that you need to for YouTube audiences. For the things that we do, good quality production is still very important. I still think it matters. It's just what's the audience need, and you have to make sure you're servicing that need first. So story, as Josh said, is extremely important. You still have to be able to, take someone through that story journey to some sort of outcome. But again, it boils down to what's the level of production you need for that particular kind of video.
And I think there's definitely room for both high production content, like with great production value, and there's room for the more UGC. And I think from a YouTube perspective, often it sort of matters how you built your initial audience in the first place, right? So if I was to use, even for example, I can use Hacksmith as an example. The Hacksmith himself, he started out that channel by himself, just a guy in a garage, and he was shooting content with like a cell phone and then like a couple of video cameras after that. But they didn't have any video know-how, let's say, but there was an authenticity to that, and people would come along and loved that video. Just this guy hanging out in his garage, building this really cool stuff. And hey, it's like me, I could do that, right? It's not Marvel. It doesn't have like $1 billion budget behind it, right? But then the struggle is as that channel starts to grow and become very popular, it's like, how do you scale, right? And all of a sudden he's finding himself, Hacksmith's got, I think like 8, 9, 10 million subs at the time or whatever. And they get some better equipment and they bring in a team to help make videos. And then all of a sudden that original fan base, that original audience is kind of like, hey, not sell out, but in a way, right? They're like, that's not why we like you. This doesn't feel the same anymore, blah, blah, blah. They get upset about this like shift that people feel they need to make because that they're more successful. At one point we made a short film to showcase some stuff, and we hired a full production team to come in, like a local production company, Astrodog at the time, came in and we filmed this whole entire short film, and it was like top end. It looked amazing, and it bombed on the channel because it was like, that's not what the audience was used to and expected. However, if you were to set yourself up from day one with that type of like production value, you build your audience around that. That's what they expect from you. As long as you're doing something different within that niche, then it's acceptable to have high production value.
Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting. Like, because it kind of goes against what I would think, and I think a lot of people would think, which is you invest in high quality content, it's going to perform really well. But if it doesn't match the audience you've built, I'm always in my head as you're talking, I'm trying to, tie that back to, like, if you're a startup founder, you're kind of looking at this and going, okay, you're building an audience, and whatever channels you're happen to use, whether it's YouTube or whether you're doing it through social, like you've set up an audience. You've set their expectations. So if you start with high quality, and then you run out of money, and you start,
the best.
I agree, but I think there's a difference too in what we're talking about. One is there's a group of people in the creator economy who are creating channels that are their source of income. Their channel is their product.
Yeah.
There are startup founders who are building products, but using YouTube as a channel to talk about their product, talk about the culture of their company and what they value in an authentic way. But they're not there to make a living from a YouTube channel. So there's a distinction between those two things.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Is there any similarity, though? Like, there's a lot of, both in like in CPG brands, in like kind of maker-based communities of the person is the brand. Right. So if they're on YouTube, they're on Instagram, TikTok, they are the brand, they're associated with it. Do you see, like, has that kind of come up in what, like, you've seen in YouTube communities where there might have been one creator who launched the channel but it was like they have a business and then they have them, but then the business starts to take off and they don't necessarily know how to transition? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see it the opposite way. I see a lot of people who were, for example, they were filmmakers or videographers, and they were very successful at creating YouTube content, started to see revenue coming in from that. And at some point, they shift their business model to being YouTube channel partners. And you can tell when they do that their content has definitely changed. They're not talking about their personal experience with using a product or something on a set. They're now getting products delivered to them, and they're showcasing those products. And I mean, when I first started my YouTube journey and I was learning about, different technologies in production, I used YouTube regularly to understand those products. And I really appreciated the people who had real practical experience using those things. And I didn't necessarily need high-end production value. I wanted to know what their experience was with that product. And so I followed them, and I was very appreciative of that. But then as I watched their journey and they became more YouTube creators, I found that it lost the authenticity for me about what they were doing. So I sort of lost interest in them.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a give and take because, with the channel that I've started up in the last, 3 years it's been, I think, already. I'm still not anywhere close to where I need the channel to be like my full-time and sole and only gig. It's getting there. Yeah. But like, I am turning down sponsorship opportunities at this point because it's not worth it yet because I don't have the views to demand enough money for the sponsorships. Yeah. But at some point, like you have to do that. Most of the money on YouTube, the bigger chunk of money is going to come through brand deals and partnership deals. And there's a way that you can do it authentically. You just have to have a little bit of integrity, which a lot of people don't have. Yeah. But you can do it in a way that works for your channel and doesn't feel too abrupt and too whatnot. But yeah.
Well, I want to talk about the show and then or the channel, and I want to talk about, but what you just talked about there, which is like most YouTube monetization, right? It is based on its views, right? So you hit a certain. Well, no, not most, but like YouTube itself, monetization is views.
Yes,
but then not overall monetization, right? Mm-hmm. But like, so with that, like, if you were just looking at the number of subscribers and views in order to make decent money off YouTube, like what is there? Like, is there a magic kind of like threshold? Like you have to hit 5 million subs or something like that?
Subs don't matter.
Okay.
Right. They're a vanity metric for the most part. It's nice to have them, of course, and everyone wants them, and you're not going to turn your nose up at getting subs. But at the end of the day, I think it's around 80% of your views come from unsubscribed people.
Okay.
At least that was the case when I was I don't know if it was that high with Hacksmith, but it was like, even when they have like 15 million subscribers, they're still getting more views from people that aren't subscribed to the channel than that are.
But I see that on Instagram all the time. Like non-follower views are way higher than follower views.
Yeah. Now Instagram's even different because it's like you're getting real views by people just like doom scrolling, and they're not choosing your content by clicking on it to watch. Right now on YouTube, you got to click. So that's the whole CTR battle. But like, what were we talking about? I just went off.
Is there a
magic number?
Before we talk about, we're going to talk about the show and we're going to talk about sponsorships and partnerships. Yeah. But like, is there a number?
Yeah. So
of views, I guess.
I think it just depends because there's a few factors that contribute to how much you make, right? Like different niches on YouTube, different content lanes, advertisers pay more per 1,000 views. You get paid per 1,000 views. There's a number. It's like you get $8 per every 1,000 views you get on a video, right? And different niches, like if you're in tech or finance, those are very high in that regard. So they might be like $12 or $13. And other niches, I'm not sure which, but you can get down to low like $4, right? So it depends on your niche. But if you were doing 1 million views, let's say, per episode, long form content, not shorts, long form, you are more than okay. Yeah. At 1 million views. But getting 1 million views on long form content is no easy. Is it like
the first million where the first million is the hardest?
Yeah, I don't know. I have not crossed 1 million yet on my channel. The most I've got is 650 to 700,000 views on one. But if you can get to a spot, even at 500,000 views consistently, like if you're releasing, let's say, long form content weekly or bi-weekly, you're going to be doing okay. If you can get to 1 million views, you can be demanding fairly large money from sponsors who want to be part of your videos and stuff like that. And that's where you end up making.
That's where the magic
is. The real money comes from the sponsorships. Yeah.
Yeah. And you talked about the authenticity of it. So like just taking an ad from anybody that doesn't align. Is that the kind of same thing where if you built your audience based on, a level of quality or a level of experience with content and then you change it and they get turned off? Is it the same thing with partnerships where like if you partnered with,
people
like
get
like a military drone company would probably kill your channel?
Yeah, exactly, right? People get ticked off over like you're putting ads in your content, you sold out, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, well, I have to in order to make this my full-time gig so that I can make more videos for you guys. But I'm going to try to be selective when that time comes, if I can, hopefully. And that comes with having enough success as well. So it's this like give and take, but catch-22. But to be selective enough that I can be sponsored by brands that make sense for my viewers and my audience as well, right? So I'm not just throwing in an ad for Manscaped in the middle of, now watch in 6 months, I'll have a Manscaped ad.
There you go.
But like,
you just put your intention out in the universe.
But like, I would try to avoid doing things that made no sense on my channel just because I'm getting a paycheck, Yeah. Because I don't want to alienate my audience I view things as a very long game in every way on YouTube. You got to have a long runway, and I'm willing to forego, to give up the couple sponsorship opportunities that have come my way so far because I think that overall they'll be detrimental to my success in the long run. So, yeah,
it's good to have that kind of that patience and that foresight.
I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to have that kind of situation that allows me to do that as well because
Oh, tell us about Serial Killer.
Breakfast cereal.
Sorry, damn it.
No worries.
Tell us about breakfast cereal.
Yeah. So after I left Hacksmith a few years back, I can't remember what year it was now. I think 2022. I left Hacksmith. It was just time to move on, and it was a great place to be. A great group of people, and it was a very fantastic opportunity. And they gave me a lot of experience and a lot of opportunities that were amazing. But it was time to move on, and I went to another company that was kind of like a BuzzFeed, and my job at the other company was to basically ideate and pitch short-form content ideas for series, for online, for whether it was for series on TikTok or Snapchat at the time, or Instagram or YouTube. So I would just have to come up with an idea for a show, pitch it, and then if it got approved, I'd see it through the piloting phase of like first few episodes, and then I would move on and start another thing. And while doing that, I came up with this idea for breakfast cereal. And I was like, ooh, I like that. I'm not giving that one away. I'm just going to put it in my pocket for myself. And that company ended up folding anyways. So I was able to make this. And I have a lot of good, close friends that are in the filmmaking industry in town here. And together with Eric, who was formerly of Astrodog Media, the owner of Astrodog Media, one of my best friends, we started making this channel together. And we shoot it in batches. So that we only have to do production once every 3-4 months for like 2 days. We just got off this weekend. We did Saturday, Sunday, and I came away out of there with like, I think 12 or 14 pieces of content, long form, in one weekend. So like now I edit that over the next 3 months and release that. And while I'm editing that, I'm working on writing what's coming out next along with another writer that I work with. And so we kind of go through cycles like that. That limits the amount of production we have to do. It is still very high production value, so we spend the time to set up and make sure that everything looks amazing and great. And it takes us a few hours to get set, but then we just bang through a ton of content and make the most of our time. So it is a true crime channel, which does have a high saturation for sure, and it does have a high. It's a good niche to be in for monetization. But I think if you're going to jump into a niche that is so incredibly oversaturated as true crime is, there's a new true crime angle every other day. You got to find your own unique angle to that, your own niche, right? So that you can try to chisel out your own audience out of this sea of true crime fans. So we went with true crime and comedy, which is a bit... It's not the first thing you think of, you know? And it's been a delicate balance for sure, because, I mean, we're talking about some very dark things. There are some people in that lane already. You've got Last Podcast on the Left. They're fairly well-known, and they do comedy stuff. They're just an audio podcast. But so each episode I started out, we would set it in a retro basement with like wood paneling and the VHS collection behind me on an old grandmother's
that 70s
couch.
show basement.
Yeah. And I got a bathrobe on or a bedrobe on, and I have a bowl of cereal because it's a cheap pun. Breakfast cereal with an S. And I did a Wheaties box. If you remember back in the day, Wheaties, you'd get a Wheaties box and it would have like Wayne Gretzky on the front of the box. So each box I would put the subject of the episode. So whichever serial killer I was doing on that given day.
So instead of Wayne Gretzky, it's like John Wayne Gacy.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly that. And then I had the boxes, real boxes made. Yeah. And I would sit down and I would tell the story of that person and inject some humor, only at the expense of the bad guy, and never making light of the crimes, obviously, or the victims, because it's still a very heavy topic. And then from there, it's kind of branched out, and we've gone into different content lanes that all still work with that, and it's gone well.
Well, the company you mentioned where the idea came from, so viral kind of content.
Called Dipley.
Oh, I remember Dipley.
Yeah.
Was that local? No.
They were London.
London.
Yeah. That was where they're headquartered in London and New York and
I remember Dipley.
Toronto, I think.
Yeah. It happens. Well, with virality, I hear that all the time, right? Like I'll talk to people and like, we need to have a set of reels that go viral, or, hey, like we saw this trend and we can do this version on it. And it's like, okay, cool. We're going to do the thing. But you know, the content norm that you work on is really around like authentic content that converts. Like it has a job to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. How do you ever face a situation where you're working with a client and that idea of, we need to do like use this audio track from Instagram to do a reel, and how do you kind of convert them to go, hey, you could do that, but if you went down this path of actually creating content that's valuable, you could build an audience that's a strong part of your funnel.
Yeah. To some of the things Josh is speaking about in terms of the way they think about and create content, it's very similar for companies that want to do that as well. I think you have to start out with the idea that you are looking for an audience that's going to be engaging with your company, but how can you help them? How can you help them think about, the way they're doing business or the way they're using products and services differently that's innovative? And I think when you do that, they start to appreciate what you're bringing to the channel and will engage with you on that. And I always encourage people I've never had anyone say, oh, we need a viral video. That's just not something I hear. There may be others that hear that, but we don't get asked that a lot. And I think that's just because they understand the nature of what we do ahead of time. So we're not being asked to produce that kind of thing. So, but I think that's really important that when you're creating content that's helpful, that's going to lead to a conversation about a sale, not to try to sell the product in that conversation, in that video. You're really helping people either get to know the expertise within your organization and start to build some trust on who you are, because they know you've hired and you have a lot of very, very smart, capable people. And so they begin to build trust in your organization, or they're experiencing content that's around sort of the success of what the product and service can do. But I think it's really important not to try to sell them at that point, at that stage anyway. You can have videos later, further down in the buyer journey that does that. But I think for a successful company channel that's going to attract, and YouTube is an amazing discovery mechanism. There are more people that search for video content on YouTube than they search for anything else on other channels. Like, more searches get performed on YouTube, specifically for videos, than get performed on Google. And it also helps tremendously with your search results too, having video content. Because if you watch how even Google search results happen now, the AI search results get put at the top. It used to be the video content. Now it's the AI search results. Then it's video. And then it's your paid and organic search results before that. So having video content in YouTube is a great, great discovery mechanism. But again, I think it's really important to sort of, as Josh said, respect the culture of who your audience is and create content for them that's going to, be engaging for them and not necessarily just try to sell them.
And I would say the other thing too is that there's absolutely zero formula for viral. That does not exist. When I was, I can talk about Dipley now; they don't exist. When I was there, it was brought to our attention all the time. It was like, we want you to go out and like basically just copy this piece of content. Yeah. Right? There's this guy who does pimple popping videos. He's a derm doctor. Just go out and copy those because that's a surefire win. It never works. It never works. Sometimes with that type of content, somebody strikes gold for whatever reason it may be. It does not mean that you can repeat that and expect the same results. I've, through my time with Hacksmith too, he learned very quickly that no one, maybe Mr. Beast, no one understands the algorithm fully. And there's no way to guarantee that even when you're a channel with, 15 million subs like that, we would be finishing off a video and we're thinking, this one's going to be huge. This one's going to be huge. And we'd release it and it would kind of flop on us. And then we'd put something else out that we were kind of just tossing out there, and that one would go big. Mm-hmm. And we would have meetings after meetings after meeting discussing the algorithm and why did that work and why didn't this work. And those are good things to have because you are learning, but like there's no guarantees.
That's wild to me.
And it's terrifying.
Yeah. It's wild and terrifying because a lot of creators, a lot of companies put effort into something and it just that's just my personal opinion, I guess, based on the experiences that I've had. But I've seen it.
I'd agree with that too. And I think the things that do go viral are kind of more authentic user-generated content.
Sometimes, and I think I think there's the best thing you can do for yourself with YouTube is if you want to be someone who, especially when you want to make YouTube like your thing, your full-time thing, I think you got to go in with the right expectations, which are. Don't expect that you're going to blow up overnight by any stretch. I set out with initially I said I'm going to give it 3 years of like weekly content. I'm going to see what I got in 3 years kind of thing. And I was 2.5 years in releasing weekly videos that I spent hours on that would get like 700 views. And, but I believed in the content and I kept behind it and kept the same quality no matter what, because I was passionate about it as well. Yeah. And I stuck with it and stuck with it and stuck with it. And now it's after 2.5 years, it's starting to go. Finally.
That's an investment. So this is an audio podcast and not a YouTube video podcast. So my eyebrows went up because I'm just like 2.5 years of
Nothing. Really.
nothing.
You're talking like I'd make like $3.41 a month.
Yeah.
It is definitely the long tail.
You couldn't go to Tim's.
Yeah, I could get a medium coffee.
Yeah.
But like, I was doing I had my full-time gig in the background, right? But I was still working on that channel every single day.
I feel like it's the same for companies, right? I mean, to build a brand, you need to think about the long term.
Yeah.
And
It's an investment.
being consistent and being true to who you are as an organization.
Yeah.
And representing that.
Integrity.
And being helpful.
And having integrity and then making a plan and sticking with it. If you believe in yourself and you believe in what you're doing, stick with it.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you can chase the algorithm and you can go. So I have people tell me all the time, oh, you know what you should do? If you did this, it would probably go big. I was like, yeah, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then if I do that and that does go big, then guess what? I got to do that again next week. And then I got to do that again the next week. And I'm going to live or die by my content the way I want to make my content, because that's the whole point of trying to do YouTube, is that I could potentially be able to make a career and a life for myself out of making videos that I enjoy making and that I'm behind and that I love. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to die by it, or I'm going to have success and I'm going to be very happy. Those are the only options for my channel.
I don't think another note we could end this on. This is great. I like that. It's good. It ties into founders.
It does tie
So
into
much.
founders, yeah.
So much.
Hey, one other thing is just, again, the difference between what Josh is talking about, and I think what companies look for, especially when you look at the difference between B2B and B2C. Like I work with a lot of B2B companies. You don't need a lot of viewers. You need the right viewers, right?
Yeah.
You won't. A lot of views is great, but again, it can be a vanity metric. What are those viewers doing? Are they coming to your website? Are they engaging with your website? Are they engaging with your sales team? Are they engaging with your other marketing assets? So for me, it's part of an ecosystem of things that you're doing. It's a very strong, powerful part of it, but it's just part of it.
Well, and it kind of sizes up with what you were talking about, viewers versus subscribers, where like you, as a brand, you don't need a ton of subscribers. You just need the right viewers who are going to go and then go to the site. And the same with this is you don't need subscribers. You need the viewers.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked for quite a few years, and I still do, directing, corporate and commercial video for clients and stuff like that too. And I think one of the biggest questions you can ask is, what's a win for this video? Like what? And like I think Norm was talking about it earlier, but for me, the video was never about telling you every single piece of information there was about a particular product. That's not what a video is good for. A video is good for exciting someone about the possibilities of this product and getting them in the door of the website or wherever the next step is in that sales funnel for the company or whatever it may be, right? Like I'm not trying to get you to click on buy now on my video. I'm trying to get you to go to the next step because I've piqued your interest enough to do that.
Yeah, breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
Breadcrumbs with the buy button.
Sometimes it's a handshake before a handshake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's about getting to know them and feeling comfortable with them as an organization and building some trust.
I love it. Well, thank you both for joining us in the studio.
Yeah, that was fun.
I learned a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We will have links to breakfast cereal in the show notes. We'll have links to unmarketing so we can talk about live streaming. If you have questions about how Communitech can help your tech company start, grow, and succeed and get millions of views on your videos, you can visit communitech.ca or follow along on social media, even on YouTube. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Thanks again.
Smash that like button.